Months passed. Their life flowed between Ethiopia and Seoul, art exhibitions, charity projects, new beginnings. Ayana's gallery had expanded, now hosting young African and Korean artists, while Wonsik had transformed Hantech into a foundation that supported global sustainability. They no longer chased success separately, they built meaning together. One evening, during an art event in Seoul, Ayana stood on stage to thank the guests. Her voice was calm but emotional. Tonight isn't just about art. It's about connection, about the bridges love and understanding can build between people, even from different worlds. As the crowd applauded, she caught Wonsik's eyes in the front row, proud, tearful, and utterly hers. In that moment, she realized something profound. Their love was no longer a story of recovery. It was a story of growth. Later, as they drove home, he reached for her hand and said, "You know what I think our greatest masterpiece is?" She smiled knowingly. "Hannah." He shook his head, his gaze soft. "Us." She laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Then let's never stop creating." Years later, in their old age, people still spoke of them. The Korean CEO and the Ethiopian artist who defied distance, culture, and pride to build something timeless. On their 20th anniversary, they sat once again on their balcony in Addis Ababa, watching the sun dip below the hills. Ayana, her hair now streaked with silver, whispered, "Do you remember the courtroom?" Wonsik smiled, his eyes glimmering. "How could I forget? You shocked the whole country." She laughed softly. "One last night," I said. "And it became a lifetime," he replied. She leaned into him, their fingers intertwined. "Then it was worth the scandal," he chuckled. "Every headline, every heartbreak." As the first stars appeared, Ayana closed her eyes, whispering, "Love doesn't always need to last forever to be true." Wonsik finished her sentence with a tender smile. "But ours did anyway." And as night embraced the highlands, two souls rested side by side. A love that began in rain, survived through storms, and found eternity in the quiet grace of forgiveness. The night sky over Seoul shimmered with 1,000 scattered lights, the Han River gliding beneath like liquid silver. From the balcony of their apartment, the city looked alive, but inside all was quiet. Ayana stood by the glass door, barefoot, wrapped in a soft silk robe the color of ivory moonlight. Her curls cascaded down her back, and her skin glowed in the amber light of the room. She looked peaceful, but her heart fluttered, that same quiet ache she always felt when she sensed him behind her. "Still awake." Wonsik's voice was low, velvety, carrying warmth through the air. She smiled faintly without turning. "Couldn't sleep. The city feels louder tonight." He walked closer, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. "Or maybe your thoughts are." She turned slowly, meeting his eyes, those familiar, gentle eyes that once burned with ambition and now glowed with devotion. "You always read me too easily," she whispered. He smiled, brushing his fingers across her jaw. "I've spent years learning your language, Ayana. Every silence, every look." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes for a moment. "Then what am I saying now?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because the emotion in her gaze made it hard to breathe. He stepped closer, his thumb grazing her lower lip. "You're saying you missed me." She laughed softly, her breath catching. "You were gone for one day, Wonsik. One day too long," he murmured. The city outside faded, leaving only them. The rhythm of their breathing, the pulse of something unspoken growing between them. He cupped her face in his hands, his forehead resting against hers. "Do you know what I thought about all day?" "What?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You. The way you make every place feel like home. Even the boardroom feels different when I think of you waiting for me." Her heart melted at his words. "You're becoming a poet now?" He smiled. "Only for you." Then his lips met hers, softly at first, as if to test the quiet. The kiss deepened slowly, tenderly, carrying the warmth of memories and the sweetness of the present. His hands trailed down her arms, his touch reverent, tracing the lines he had memorized long ago. When they finally parted, Ayana's eyes glistened. "You still kiss me like it's the first time," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Every time feels like that when it's you." Later, they lay together on the couch, wrapped in a single blanket, her head resting against his chest. The faint hum of the city below mingled with the soft music playing in the background. "Do you remember?" she said softly. "The first night I stayed at your place? You were too nervous to even touch me." He laughed quietly. "You were wearing that red dress. I thought if I touched you, I'd burn." She smiled, tracing small circles on his chest with her finger. "And now I still burn," he said, his hand gently brushing her hair. "But it feels like warmth, not fire. You've become the calm I never knew I needed." Her eyes softened. "And you've become the peace I always hoped love could be." He looked down at her, his expression tender. "Then we finally found what forever means." She smiled, her voice barely a whisper. "What does it mean to you?" He paused, then said slowly, "Forever is every night I get to hold you. Every morning I wake up and you're still here. It's not endless time, it's endless choice. Choosing you again and again." Her breath caught, tears stinging her eyes. "You've really changed, Wansakan." He chuckled softly, kissing the top of her head. "You keep saying that. Because I keep falling for you all over again," she said, her voice trembling. He tilted her chin up and kissed her again. Longer this time, deeper, until the world outside their window dissolved into stars and silence. Hours later, the candles had burned low, casting lazy shadows on the walls. Ayana lay half asleep in his arms, her voice soft against his chest. "You know," she murmured, "I used to think our story ended in that courtroom." He stroked her hair gently. "It almost did. But maybe it had to," she continued, her eyes still closed, "so that when we found each other again, we'd know what love really meant." He smiled against her hair. "And what does it mean to you now?" She lifted her face just enough to meet his gaze. "It means home." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, whispering, "Then I'll spend the rest of my life keeping you there." Outside, the rain began again. Soft, steady, familiar. Like the echo of their first goodbye, now rewritten as forever. And in the quiet glow of that soul night, surrounded by the hum of their shared heartbeat, Ayana and Wansik fell asleep in each other's arms. Not as the couple who once broke apart, but as two souls who had finally learned how to stay. Because this time, love didn't need to be saved. It had already found its home. The plane descended slowly through the Ethiopian sky, sunlight bathing the landscape in gold. From above, the mountains rolled like waves, the air shimmering with the promise of home. Ayana pressed her forehead against the window, smiling softly. "Every time I see it from up here," she murmured, "it feels like my heart is coming home before I do." Wansik turned to her, watching the quiet glow on her face. "Then it's not just your home," he said gently. "It's ours." She looked at him, her husband, her peace, her miracle, and reached for his hand. "Welcome home, then." He squeezed her fingers, his smile holding something secret, something she couldn't quite read. They landed in Addis Ababa and were greeted by a gentle breeze carrying the scent of coffee, wildflowers, and nostalgia. Ayana's family waited with open arms and tearful laughter, embracing them both. Hannah, now 8, ran ahead, shouting joyfully in Amharic as she reunited with her cousins. Ayana laughed, her eyes glistening. "She's grown so Ethiopian." Wansik smiled. "She's grown like her mother, strong and radiant." The next few days were filled with family, food, and stories, laughter echoing through the hills, the rhythm of drums at dusk, and long walks beneath the acacia trees. Ayana felt at peace, but she noticed how often Wansik disappeared in the afternoons, whispering to her brothers, checking his phone with a faint smile. "What are you planning?" she asked one evening, catching him with a mischievous grin. He only kissed her hand and said, "You'll see, my love, soon." A week later, on a quiet night when the moon hung low and golden, he asked her to dress beautifully but simply. She wore a soft white habesha chemise embroidered with gold, her hair adorned with tiny jasmine flowers. When she stepped out, Wansik's breath caught in his throat. "You look," he exhaled slowly, "like every prayer I never knew how to say." She blushed, shaking her head. "You've learned too many poetic words, Wansik Han." He chuckled, offering his hand. "Then let me show you something that doesn't need words." He led her up a narrow trail toward the highlands just beyond her family's estate. Lanterns lined the path, flickering softly in the breeze. When they reached the top, Ayana gasped. The hilltop was transformed. A sea of candles and white petals surrounded a small wooden table draped in silk. Beyond it, the stars stretched endlessly, closer than she had ever seen them. She turned to him, stunned. "Wansik, what is all this?" He took both her hands, his eyes luminous under the moonlight. 10 years ago, we stood in a courtroom ready to end everything. You asked me for one night, and that night changed my life. So tonight, Ayana Tesfahan, I'm asking for one more night." Her voice trembled. "One more night." He nodded. "Every 10 years, I want to ask you again, to fall in love with me, to say yes, not out of duty, but out of choice." Ayana's tears sparkled like glass. "You foolish, beautiful man," she whispered, laughing through her sobs. "Do you think I ever stopped saying yes?" He smiled and pulled her close, their foreheads touching as the wind wrapped around them. "Then say it again," he whispered. "I will," she breathed. 1,000 times. They danced beneath the stars, barefoot, heart to heart. The night carried their laughter, their whispers, their quiet promises. The music was only the sound of crickets, the wind, and their shared breath. Later, as they lay on a blanket under the open sky, Ayana rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to dream about a love that would feel like home," she said softly, "but I never imagined it would follow me wherever I go." He brushed his thumb along her jaw. "Home isn't a place anymore. It's your heartbeat." She smiled, eyes closed. "You always say things that make me cry. Then let me make you laugh instead," he said playfully, tickling her side until her laughter spilled into the night. When the laughter faded, silence returned, but a warm, tender silence. He turned toward her and whispered, "Ayana, MHM, when the world gets busy again, when we go back to Seoul, promise me we'll still find time for this. Just us." She lifted her face, kissed him softly, and murmured, "Even when the world ends, I'll find my way back to you." He smiled, his voice a whisper against her lips. "Then the stars will always remember us." That night, the moon became their witness, the hilltop their altar, and love their everlasting language. As dawn touched the horizon, Wansik pulled her closer, whispering, "One more night became a lifetime. And yet, it still never feels enough." Ayana smiled, her tears glistening in the sunrise. "Then let's make forever longer." And there, where love first healed and bloomed again, they kissed. Not as two who found their way back, but as one soul that had never truly been apart. The first light of dawn crept softly over the horizon, spilling gentle gold across the highlands. Dew clung to the grass, and the air carried the faint scent of coffee blossoms and morning wind. Ayana stirred, half asleep on the blanket spread across the hilltop. Her head rested on Wansik's chest, his heartbeat slow and steady beneath her ear, a rhythm she had come to trust more than time itself. When she opened her eyes, she found him already awake, watching her. His smile was quiet, tender. "Good morning, Mrs. Han." She smiled drowsily, brushing her curls from her face. "Good morning, my poet." He chuckled softly, tucking a jasmine flower behind her ear. "You look beautiful in the morning light. And you," she teased, "look like you didn't sleep at all." He laughed under his breath, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Because I was busy watching the woman who made me forever real." Her heart swelled at his words. She looked at him, really looked, the way his hair caught the light, the warmth in his eyes, the gentle trace of age around them that made him even more human, even more hers. "Wansik," she whispered, "you keep finding ways to make me fall again. That's the plan." he said, rising slowly and extending his hand. Come with me. They walked down the hill barefoot, hand in hand. The earth was cool beneath their feet, and the sun painted their shadows long and golden. When they reached the edge of the estate, Ayana froze. The garden was transformed. White and gold flowers lined the path. Silk cloths fluttered in the breeze. Her family, her friends, even Hannah stood waiting, dressed beautifully, smiling through tears. Ayana turned to him, stunned. Wansik, what is this? He took both her hands, his eyes glimmering with emotion. 10 years ago, we signed papers to end what we didn't yet understand. 10 years later, I want us to sign something new. Not in ink, but in promise. Tears filled her eyes. You planned this. He nodded. Every word, every detail. Your brothers helped, your mother cooked, and Hannah. He smiled as their daughter approached with a small bouquet. She's the flower girl. Ayana covered her mouth, trembling with joy. You're impossible. Only for you, he whispered, as soft music filled the air. A blend of Ethiopian strings and Korean flute. They stood beneath an arch woven with coffee leaves and white roses. Hannah held the bouquet proudly, her little voice bright as she said, Appa, Umma, say your words now. Ayana laughed through her tears. Oh, my love. Where do I begin? She turned to Wansik, her voice trembling with emotion. You once said happiness is where I am. But you've given me more than happiness. You've G. The days in the countryside rolled by softly. Morning coffee, shared smiles, small hands and bigger ones. Hannah was now a teenager, tall, curious. A mix of her mother's calm eyes and her father's steady heart. She would often find her parents on the veranda, sitting close, their hands unconsciously linked as they watched the sun climb over the valley. Appa, Hannah teased one morning. You look at Umma like you're still dating. Wansik smiled without embarrassment. That's because I still am. Ayana laughed, tossing a handful of coffee berries toward him. You're teaching her all the wrong things about men. I'm teaching her the right things about love, he said. Hannah rolled her eyes, but there was a secret softness in her smile as she went back inside. She had grown up seeing love not as grand gestures, but as small daily tendernesses. The brush of hands in passing, a quiet glance across a table, a kiss on the forehead before dawn. That evening, rain came, soft at first, then steady, drumming gently on the tin roof. Ayana and Wansik stayed outside under the veranda, wrapped in a blanket, watching the storm roll across the valley. Do you remember our first rain together? She asked. He smiled. How could I forget? You were angry at me for ruining your shoes. She laughed. You deserved it. You were so proud back then, always in control, never smiling. And you, he said, touching her cheek, were the first person who didn't care who I was, just what I felt. Her eyes softened. That's because I saw the man you were trying to hide. He leaned closer, his voice low. And you loved him anyway. I still do, she whispered. The rain became a melody, steady, comforting. He pulled her close, her head resting beneath his chin. You know, he said, every time it rains, I thank heaven that you didn't walk away that night in court. She smiled, her voice quiet. I didn't walk away because I knew if I did, I'd never find my way back to myself. And to me? He asked. She looked up at him with that same tender courage she had always carried. You were already part of myself. He kissed her then. A kiss soft as the rain, long and patient, like the years they had walked together. The next morning, Hannah sat with her mother while Ayana painted. Umma, she said, how do you know when it's really love? Ayana paused, her brush hovering over the canvas. You'll know, she said quietly, when you stop needing to be understood and start feeling seen. Hannah frowned. Appa sees you that way? Anna smiled. Every day. Even when I forget myself, he remembers me. That night, Hannah told her father what her mother had said. Wansik only smiled and replied, then your mother has always been the artist, even with words. As the years passed, their home filled with light, laughter at breakfast, stories under the stars, small touches that spoke louder than any vow. And when people asked Ayana and Wansik the secret to their happiness, Ayana would only smile and say, "Love doesn't stay perfect because it's easy. It stays perfect because you keep choosing each other, even on the quiet days." The years had been kind to Ayana and Wansik. Their love had settled into something softer, deeper, a rhythm that moved like a quiet song beneath their every breath. It was a warm spring night in Seoul. The cherry blossoms had begun to fall, their petals scattering across the Han River like whispers of forgotten dreams. Wansik had brought Ayana back to the city for their anniversary, to the very spot where their story had almost ended, and then begun again. As they walked hand in hand along the river, the city lights shimmered around them. Ayana wore a simple white dress that swayed with the breeze. Wansik, in a soft linen shirt, looked nothing like the cold CEO the world once knew. He looked at her as if she were his only truth. "Do you ever think," she began softly, "how strange it is that the place that once held our goodbye now holds so many of our memories?" He smiled, turning toward her. "That's because love rewrites its own story, Ayana. We just had to live long enough to see the new ending." She laughed quietly, her voice like music. "You've grown poetic with age." He chuckled, brushing a stray petal from her hair. "You've grown more beautiful with every year." Her eyes softened. "Flattery, Mr. Han?" "Truth, Mrs. Han." They stopped beneath a canopy of falling blossoms. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was full of the scent of flowers and the faint sound of music from a nearby cafe. Ayana closed her eyes, letting the wind play with her curls. Wansik stepped closer, his hand gently finding her waist. "May I have this dance?" he asked. "There's no music," she teased softly. "There is," he whispered. "It's just us who can hear it." And so, under the rain of cherry blossoms, they danced slowly, swaying to the rhythm of hearts that had known both storm and sunshine. His hand traced the small of her back, hers rested against his chest, where his heartbeat spoke all the words he couldn't. "I used to be afraid," he murmured, "afraid that love would make me weak." "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now I know love is the only thing that made me strong." Her eyes shimmered. "You've changed, Wansik." He smiled softly. "You're the reason I did." Their lips met, soft at first, then deeper, as the city lights blurred around them. It wasn't the kiss of passion found in youth, but the quiet, aching devotion of two souls who had already found home in each other. Every breath, every touch carried the echo of promises kept and forgiven. When they finally pulled apart, Ayana rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember that night in court?" she whispered. He nodded, holding her tighter. "I remember everything, especially how brave you were. You didn't ask for revenge. You asked for love's last chance. And it became my first real beginning." She smiled through her tears. "Sometimes I think that night saved both of us." He kissed her temple gently. "No, my love, you did." Later that evening, back at their penthouse, they stood by the window, watching Seoul shimmer beneath the moonlight. The same skyline that once saw their pain now witnessed their peace. Ayana turned toward him. "You know," she said softly, "we never took a honeymoon after our second wedding." Wansik smiled. "Then let's take it now. Anywhere you want." She tilted her head, a mischievous spark in her eyes. "Ethiopia." He laughed quietly. "Back where your heart began." She touched his face gently. "And where ours began again." He kissed her fingers, his voice low. "Then Ethiopia it is. But tonight," he leaned in, his lips brushing hers, "I just want to stay here, with you." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then stay." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.